Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Core, and I'm back with another episode of True Virtue. If you follow me, you watch any of my videos, you know I try to cover a virtue every 2 days or whenever I get around to it, right? Life is hectic, so this to me is like a nice bonus. I actually look forward to it. You know, it's like a nice kind of like a meditation time. I take this time to talk about things, listen to it, and hold myself accountable, right? So I always say that this is a selfish thing. This is really something for me. I make it, public just so I can hold myself accountable, but it's something I go back and I watch, right? So today is November 21st, 2017. It is 4:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and today I'm going to be talking about consideration, right? What does it mean to be considerate, to understand other people, what they're going through, right? To be contemplative, to understand, right? So the reason I kind of want to have a focus with this, right? Because every time I turn on the news, I'm seeing over and over and over accusation. Harvey Weinstein, Russell Simmons now, who else? A whole bunch of other people are just constantly going down. Al Franken, the senator, who was a comedian first, he took a picture laughing, put his hands a certain way, and that's bad, I guess, now. So now he's having trouble. So it's important to me, to kind of apply consideration, right? Because I think in anything, right, to apply virtue in anything, typically, I think makes you a better person all the way around, right? So if you're considerate of others at all times, which is difficult because I think we get an ego, you know what I'm saying? We're like, yo, this is who I am. And then we just kind of just go off of who we are. And then we may say things or do things we don't necessarily mean. We may be playing around. People may take it serious. So it's kind of like a scary time to me. Because I'm somebody who loves to play around, and I'm also someone who doesn't like boxes. I like to be able to draw outside of the line, and I just try not to offend people, but I don't like having any subject undiscussable, right? Like being able to talk about certain things, right? So, but when you're considerate, there's certain things you have to kind of understand. So you have to tread softly, and that hasn't really been something I've been good at. I've always been like assertive, move forward, figure it out when I get there, right? But consideration is probably not one of my strongest virtues. Definitely something I want to work on. To be considerate is to understand the plight of others, right? I've never been a female. I don't know what it is to be a female. I love women. I love my mother. I love my sisters. I love my wife. So I can empathize, but I cannot really truly live. So I don't understand. I can see like, wow, I traveled all around the world and I went to all these different places. A lot of times I was alone. It's different when I'm talking to a friend of mine who's a female, a family member, and they're like, wow, you did that. I wish I could do that. I'm like, wow, I didn't even think that way because it's not in my paradigm, right? So I think to be considerate is to constantly try to put yourself in other people's shoes, right? Always. As soon as you get around people, try to understand what they're going through. And I like to say I'm fortunate and grateful enough to have that, which is a virtue, gratitude, that when I'm around other people, I try to understand. But at the same token, because I'm understanding, to a certain level, I kind of expect it, and I try to stay away from the word expectation because that usually brings problems, right? When you expect someone to do something. So it's like, I'm understanding, so I'm just going to be who I am, and I'm praying at the world or hoping that the world sees that. Prayer is another virtue. But it doesn't work that way sometimes, right? So it's a scary time, but it's an exciting time because we're evolving. You know what I'm saying? We're not tolerating this anymore, and we shouldn't tolerate it. We should hold ourselves accountable. Listen, I am imperfect. You know what I mean? I have made a lot of mistakes, walking this life called humanity. But I like to think what makes me strong is acknowledging those mistakes and being able to deal with them, right? So it's like people are being forced now, at least via the news, right? Where it's like, you said this 20 years ago, 40 years ago, like, isn't there like a statute of limitations? Like, having people change, at least I like to think, right? So, but it's just a crazy thing, right? But also to be considerate, to understand that there's certain things you just shouldn't say about homosexuals, right? You should be considerate and understand that maybe you will offend them, right? But then there's also a time where offense is necessary, where it's like sometimes in order to grow, you have to be offended. Communication offends sometimes. The truth hurts. You ever heard that statement that it hurts? The pain is usually the signal to change. And if we stop going toward that pain signal, we stop evolving, I think. But also, if it's malignant, it's nasty, and you just flawed, morally, and you just kind of like project it out on others, I think you should be held accountable, right? But I don't want to go on and on and on. I do want to talk about what I'm here to talk about today, which is consideration. So what is consideration? Definition of consideration is giving careful thought to the needs and others. It is also holding a decision and contemplative, thoughtful way. So as a man, right, there's certain conversations I will have around other men without even consciously being aware of it. You know, I try not to say do certain things because I'm always trying to think about other people. But you just find yourself in certain conversations. It's just like, okay, you have to kind of move out, or you kind of have to adjust and communicate, right? And just deal with the surroundings, right? And when you're considering others, let's say you're in a group of 2 or 3 people, they're talking about something that clearly that intrigues them, right? So you, to be that 4th person, to try to engage in that conversation to some extent, right? And I like to think there isn't any conversation I could walk into and not be comfortable, even if I'm uncomfortable, because I thrive on being uncomfortable. I thrive on learning and dealing with things I try to get away from, right? Or I think as human beings we try to get away from. We always want to be comfortable. So there's conversations, there's certain harsh words and topics that people try to avoid, and I always try to go right into those things because I feel as though the faster you can communicate and talk about it, the further you get past it. But now I'm watching TV and it's like, wow, if we're talking about racism, or we're talking about sexism or pedophilia and all these other things, serious issues, I think we should communicate, which is a virtue too. We should talk about, because I believe communication solves things. And if you don't go at it judging someone and you're wrong and this is all the other thing, you can actually make a friend and actually have someone see it from a different perspective. But it just feels like it's getting more difficult to communicate. Like, people aren't listening as much. People aren't considerate of other people, right? So I'm going to go back into the card. Consideration is giving careful thought to the needs of others. It is also holding a decision in a contemplative and thoughtful way. Think before you talk. Try to imagine how your words will affect others. Be mindfully considerate that what will result from our choices before we act. We speak with gentleness and tact. We care about others and their feelings. We carefully observe their preferences and needs, then do things to give them ease or bring them joy. Consideration shines in small daily acts that add to the happiness of others. It is one of the most meaningful ways to show love. Considerate people give the very best gifts. Now, I agree. We should always be trying to find a way to bring happiness to other people. We should always be trying to lift the burden. We should always be trying to look out for our common man, right? We should always be trying to find a way to help. But it's also my way of thinking that though consideration is an important virtue, there are other virtues. And there are other virtues that speak with honesty, and honesty hurts, right? That's a virtue. And, assertiveness, which is one of my favorite virtues, just asserting, just getting on top of a situation, being aware and being confident. Those things offend people. Sometimes your very confidence offends people. So it's almost impossible to live life honestly without offending, because the word honest in itself hurts. So if you have something inside you that's dirty and nasty, that's not necessarily the time to be honest, right, with it. I'm not saying not to be honest with yourself, but in public, if you have a certain worldview about race, I think it's safe to speak it in a certain context, right? Careful of how you do it and considerate of how you communicate it carefully. But also be considerate of how you can offend people at the same time. And like I said, you're going to offend people no matter what. People will always be hurt. You can't get around that, right? So I don't even know where I'm going with this. I do know that it's important to be considerate. It's important to be aware of what other people are feeling. But it works on both sides. It's important that the person you're being considerate to returns that consideration to a certain extent, right? To try to understand where you're coming from too, right? So back to the card. Blessed is one who adds to the happiness of another. Zoroastrianism. The practice of consideration. These are I affirmations. I think about others' needs. I am thoughtful of their feelings. I speak gently and tactfully. Tact is a virtue. Tact is choosing your words carefully. And I'm a lover of words. So I try to be careful with them, but because I love them somewhat, sometimes I like debating too. I like to just go at it, and sometimes I just like to fight with people with words, almost like conjecture, to play with it, like a sword fight. But after the sword fight or the boxing match, we shake hands and walk away. Some people really get offended. You'll see, I can say something to someone, just messing with someone, almost like a comedic thing, and people just get so sensitive. So it's like learning to be considerate, knowing who I can joke with and who I can play with and who I can say certain things and do certain things, because I can be on the news in 2 years for saying something inappropriate that's not considered inappropriate today, that's inappropriate 5 years from now. You know what I mean? Like speaking about whatever. So it's like, it's a scary time, but you know what? I think if you operate from a true center of virtue, kindness, patience, charity, understanding, one way or another, everything will work themselves out. You'll be persecuted, you'll be prosecuted, all types of things will happen no matter what, but what you stand for is the most important thing, and your principles, right? And I like to think our principles should be humanity, understanding, consideration. We all have our issues, we all have things that we're working on, right? But if we're honest enough with ourselves to work with them, to be going through therapy with them, to be finding some way to deal with things, right? It's important. We're transitioning from this prehistoric, at least I like to think, right? I'm hopeful, that's a virtue, that we're changing from this way of operating to this more enlightened, more open to the universe, more considerate of others, right? And in that evolution, there's certain thought processes that change, right? Unbeknownst to myself, unaware, a lot of times I think like a man because I'm just a man, right? It's something I've identified with growing up. And this whole gender thing is being under attack from, you know, transsexuals going into bathrooms to, you know, whatever, your identity, how women feel, how men feel, you know, I know to a certain extent as a man, I feel somewhat under attack. I feel like if I was to say something that was considered off color, if it was a sexual statement, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think sex is important. I wouldn't be here without sex. I think talking about sex is important. I think bringing wisdom about it and understanding about it is important. You know, both virtues, wisdom and understanding, right? So, but when it's imposed as power, like you do this or you won't get this, or I expect this from you and you need to do this, you know, I know I grew up watching movies as a kid where they would say dame this and this stupid broad, and the way they objectify women. This is part of my subconscious. This is things I've seen, and I actively work on being enlightened, right, and being progressive and seeing things in a better light. But imagine a person who grew up their entire life like that, and that's what they saw, and it was just their way of thinking. It's really difficult for them to evolve and transition to where we're going because they're so stuck in their ways. So I think we need to be considerate of where others are and trying to help them get there instead of just accusation. You did this to me. This is terrible. I think we should step back as a society and try to usher people toward a new reality. Listen, this is what it is. It's going to have to be that way. You're going to have to get with the program, right? I mean, should people immediately lose their job? I guess it depends, right? It really depends. But if it's just accusations, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But if someone's done something inappropriate and made someone feel comfortable, you know, I heard someone say, if you are in a workplace, there's certain things you shouldn't discuss. Very true. You're at work for 20 to 40 hours, right? You go home. What about the overachiever who lives at work, who only works? There's a time when you're spending so much time with people, you drop your guard and you just talk naturally, and then that natural talk that happens to be inside of a context of a professional atmosphere. And then suddenly you are held accountable for being human or speaking in a way that's considered unprofessional. And to me, the word unprofessional means speaking in a way that is cold, that's not connected, really, but trying to not offend people, but not really being human, because I think offending is what makes us great. Pain, we learn from that. You know what I mean? We grow from that if it's in the right environment, right? So I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at things, right? There's no one direction other than to say just try to be more considerate. So I am thankful for the gift of consideration. It allows me to brighten others' lives. When we consider other people, what they're going through, we show them a level of respect. We make them feel like, wow, this person's actually taking the time to understand where I'm coming from, which is a virtue, understanding. You know, you automatically increase the respect in other people. You respect yourself when you do that, right? But I think as human beings, depending on how you were raised, right? You didn't have a secure family growing up, or whatever the reason. I'm not trying to make excuses, because I know personally I didn't know I didn't have a male role model, you know, or the people in my male role model schematic, or whatever you want to call it, was sexist in a lot of ways. And I don't think they were intentionally being sexist. I think that society was showing them sexism, and they were just kind of being that. And I heard a lot of people say, well, that's no excuse. I'm not trying to make an excuse. I'm just trying to understand, which is a virtue of why things are, and then trying to understand how to affect change, right? You know what I mean? So I was a product of that. You know, I think a lot of men are a product of that, just like a lot of women are a product of sexism. You know, you live in a world where you dress a certain way, you look a certain way, it gets you the job easier, you want a better paycheck, you want to survive, and you kind of conform, you adjust, right? So I think we're living in a time where, like always, we're evolving and growing, and I think we need to be considerate of the people who are inconsiderate. We need to be considerate of the people who are considerate. We need to understand that we have to be patient, right? Which is another virtue, and try to help people to change. If someone's behavior is persistent and blatant, I think they should be reprimanded. I think they should be suspended, possibly given an opportunity to change, because change is the true motivation and inspiration. So if someone is this sexual accusation, if someone is guilty, right? Someone has done these things. Okay, they apologize. Great. What do they do now? They go back, get some counseling and work on it and do things in the community and keep going and like probation. You should, for 3 years, you should be in the front of women's rights if you made mistakes, right? You know, so I know me personally, a few years back, I did a tour, a domestic violence tour. You know, growing up, I saw my uncle putting hands on my aunt. You know, that was a reality to me. You know, I didn't understand that relationship. I knew I didn't like him hitting my aunt, but because of that, I started to see in his way like that was something that was necessary. And since as far as I could remember, I just knew it was wrong, but it was what I was shown, and it's something I still deal with and I think about, because it's like, you know, that's what he did. He didn't sit down and communicate. That's why I think maybe I'm so high on communicating, because I saw things. I was like, yeah, I want to do things differently. But what about the person who hasn't chosen to do things differently? It's just chosen to adjust to the environment, right? So I guess I'm saying all of that to say this. I think we need to be considerate of where we are as a species, as a race, as a group of people. We need to understand the racists. We need to understand the pedophiles. I'm not saying we stick up for them or justify them. What I'm saying is we need to understand the people who are, mass murderers. We need to take that time to understand. It's so easy to point. And I'm not in no way sticking up for them. I'm not saying, yo, yeah, they're good people. No, what I'm saying is, in order to evolve as human beings for the next generation or whatever, we have to understand it. And it's too easy to judge it and just point at it and say it's wrong because the crowd is saying it. And you're like, yeah, it's terrible. I agree it's terrible. Now what are we going to do about it? Right? So I think it's just a lot of people pointing wrong. And then there's the people behind them who want their job. And there's people behind them who've been enemies of them the whole time and just waiting for this opportunity. And then the floodgates open and nothing really changes. We just replace them with someone else who is better at acting like there's something they're not. You know, so I think we live in a society, almost a world where we're promoting the actors, the actresses, the people who aren't authentic, the people who aren't truly trying to make a difference. So I know I'm saying a lot, but to be considerate, I believe, means to just put yourself in other people's shoes, just to genuinely, and do that, you have to understand them. That's what I've been talking about. And you have to listen, and you have to try to put yourself in their mindset. And then really on top of that, try not to judge. Is it wrong to sexually assault anyone, male or female? Absolutely. Is it wrong to be attracted to them? I don't think so. I think it's wrong to act on that attraction if the person isn't reciprocating, if the person isn't showing some sort of interest. But then I grew up with movies where guys would just kiss women. Like, I heard Trump say, I just start kissing them. Like, I'm not justifying that either. I think that's wrong. But we have to look at where we are as a society. We have to understand in order to move forward. And that's all I'm trying to say. I think I've been talking more about the virtue of understanding and consideration. But I hope you got something from this. Before I go, I just want to go over a few words, right, that are related to consideration, right? So what does consideration mean actually via the internet? Consideration is careful thought, typically over a period of time. In order to truly evolve and grow, you have to be considerate of others and really consider it of yourself. Consider, where did you develop your thinking patterns? Where did you develop your anger, your frustration? Why? Where did that come from? And consider to change, how to change that. Consider what you have to do to change the way you think and the way you operate. You know what I'm saying? It's so crucial with that, because I think self-reflection is the most important thing you can do. We all have demons. We all have issues. We all have problems. And you can act like they don't exist and put them in a corner, and like when you see somebody on television doing something wrong and you're like, oh, that's terrible, but you know you're guilty. I know I'm guilty. I know I'm guilty of making a lot of mistakes. And I think what makes a person great is that the admission of guilt. Like, yo, I made a mistake and I'm working on getting better. You know what I'm saying? I've made a mistake with the foods I eat. I make a mistake with the friends I choose. We're constantly evolving, right? So how do you grow? Acknowledging, right? Admitting, dealing with, and trying not to judge, right? So another word associated with consideration is happiness. When you're considerate, you are trying to make other people happy. You know, you're not bending and trying to push who you are out of the way. You're just trying to be understanding of who they are and try to really understand what makes them happy, and then try to provide that happiness, right? So when you're considerate, it's directly related to happiness and bringing people joy, right? So joy is just like a state of, avoiding danger or feeling worryful. It's just like, yes. And if you're considerate, you're giving people joy, right? And you're also careful, right? So when you're considerate, you're like, I don't want to say this. I don't want to. I'm careful. Whoops. Let me be careful. And then in time, you're careful and you're patient and you're listening. You learn what not to do, and then eventually you chip away or talk about that in a safe way that can, hopefully build a bridge, right? So another word directly associated with consideration is tact. Tact is just choosing, which is a virtue, choosing to use your words carefully. You ever heard the saying, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it at all? That's real talk. What that means, if you're going to hurt someone, you're probably going to hurt someone, try to stay away from it. And if you are going to, try to choose your words really carefully, because you know it's a trigger word. You're going to say something that can spark them, right? My assertiveness, I kind of like when I'm passionate about something, I'll speak from a centered place and offend. And I'm working on not doing that, really, because then at the same time, people are sensitive. You're going to hurt them anyway. So it's like always this balance, right? This yin and yang, trying to figure this thing out called life. And that's contemplation. When you contemplate, which is another word directly related to consideration, is contemplating, thinking. What if? What questions can I ask, right? Considering other people's feelings, other people's experiences, other people's frames of experiences, frames of references, right? When you can do that, you can operate inside of their mindset, and then you can truly engage and have dialogue and have friendship, which is another virtue, right? Friendship. Everyone wants a good friend, and a true friend is just someone who's trying to understand you, trying to inspire you, and be honest with you at the same time, which is difficult, right? So it's gentleness, right? Another word directly related to consideration is being gentle. Are you okay? How do you feel about that? And challenging at the same time. Listen, I hear you, I'm with you, I love you, but I gotta challenge you on that. Like, I disagree, and I don't know if that's exactly how you feel or why you would feel that way. Instead of coming out and say you're a liar, you're full of shit, or doing that. Some people respect that. I know at certain tokens, I want you to speak clearly to me, straightforward. And to a certain extent, depending on our friendship and the spirit in which you deliver it to me, I'll contemplate it, right? Which is what I'm talking about. I'll think about it. But I don't want people to bite their tongue. That's just me personally. I want you to say it how you mean it. I'd like to understand you for a period of time before you just come at me, because I don't understand where it's coming from if I don't understand you. So to me, it's a period of, like, you start a new job, it's like 3 months, right? And then you suddenly part of the rest of the team. I think any friendship or relationship, there's a certain time frame. You just tread softly, take your time, understand, ask questions, and then unleash, and then back up, unleash, back up, because honesty is an unleashing process, right? It's a scary thing, and a lot of us are trying to get away from that because we can offend people, we can hurt people, right? A lot of different things. So thoughtfulness, I'm gonna get out of here with this one. When you're thoughtful, your thoughts are trying to operating around that person or that thing. Oh, this person went through this as a kid, maybe I shouldn't talk about that. Maybe, and if I do, I gotta do it this way. This happened. And a lot of people say, I don't got time for that. Like, then you don't have time to be a good friend. Friendliness is a virtue. I know I'm guilty of that as well. I have been a horrible friend in a lot of ways to people, because I've been a horrible friend to myself a lot growing up. I don't know what friendship, at least I didn't know what it was growing up. it was so hard that it was always survival. You know what I mean? So we never stayed in any place long enough for me to build a relationship or friendship. It was from 0 to like 10. I was always moving around. It was always something happening. It was always school here. This one, I made a friend and I had to leave, and then there's a girl I liked or liked me, and then I had to leave. It was always, I didn't learn that, and only in my adult years, and still partially why I'm doing these virtues. I'm teaching myself. You know, I didn't have that male role model show me. My mother, God bless her, I love her, but she was imperfect in a lot of ways. She had a lot of her own issues she was going through, right? So, you know, I think we need to be more understanding. We need to be more considerate and thoughtful for where people are. We need to listen. We need to ask questions. We need to be patient, which is another virtue, right? Instead of just, you see it on the news, this person is guilty of that. Oh, what the hell was he doing? Be curious. Why? What happened? What's going on in their head? But we don't have that time. We're like trying to process so much information. We got bills to pay. We got our own life's issues that we just kind of gloss over stuff. And people in the news, people all over, wherever, are biased. You know what I'm saying? They are truly operating from a place of their own perspective or their agendas or whatever, right? So I think we have to just kind of be more considerate of where people are coming from, why people are coming from there, and who we are, and why we feel the way we feel about that. So I hope I've been helpful. I want to say I've been doing virtues. Eventually, I'm going to start doing my vices. I'm going to go into lust, greed, anger, all these different things. The more exciting stuff people like to hear more about. But this is important to me, so I keep doing them. So I appreciate your comments. Feel free to put a little note on the bottom to show me you listened, like or whatever. That means a lot to me. And until next time, I hope consideration, you find it somewhere. You consider it with yourself. You consider it of others. You take time, you know, to understand opposed to just reacting. So until next time, I'm going to say peace.